Welcome to another episode of Divorce Explained. I'm Leanne Townsend, and I'm joined by my colleague, Steve Benmor. Today we have a rather interesting topic, and it's a topic that probably 20 years ago may have not been as relevant of an issue as it is today. But it's the question, and it comes up quite a bit with some of my clients. Do I need to pay child support for my adult child? And there's a phenomena in our society today and here in 2025 called delayed adulthood. And I've read about it, and it's a common thing. And, you know, a 22-year-old or a 23-year-old in today's world is maybe not the same as a 22-year-old or 23-year-old when Steve and I were that age, and then even more so when our parents were that age. And so things have changed a lot. And so how long someone needs to pay child support for is an issue that's coming up a little bit more and more. How about in your practice, Steve? Have you found that this has been an issue?
Yeah, absolutely. Because as you say, family law really tracks the norms and the mores in society. And so whether you're in North America or in Europe, families all over the world have seen children becoming mature later in life. And part of it is as a result of the conduct of the parents. Some parents enable their children to remain dependent upon them. Some parents are, we've formerly used the term helicoptering, and therefore keeping the children sort of in the nest deliberately longer. And it's therefore made it more acceptable, especially when all of your friends and neighbors are doing the very same thing. On top of that, there is some other factors going on in the world. A lower level of employment, a higher cost of higher education, and the most popular one these days is unaffordable housing. So when you move them all together into the same basket, you've got the 18-year-old kid who may or may not be interested in going to college or university, or they do, but on a part-time level, or they start and stop and start and stop. And what was going to be a 3-year degree or a 4-year degree becomes a 7-year degree simply because they are taking fewer courses per year. And then, of course, there's those that graduate university with a lovely degree in, say, sociology or English literature or political science, none of which provides anybody with any vocational skills to work. So they come back home and they're living there, possibly doing some part-time work, maybe taking a certificate, maybe working as a waiter in the gig employment. They might be doing Uber deliveries. And so therefore, they're not in a position to be financially independent. They can't afford rent. They can't afford to have a roof over their head or their own car. And in some cases, it gets even worse, where the adult child brings their boyfriend or girlfriend into their parents' home to live with them. And so then the parents not only do not become an empty nester, they become a fuller nester by virtue of the fact that the kids are back home, sometimes with partners. So the question is, what's the law on this? Now, we're only answering this, A, by way of discussion and information and not by giving any legal advice. And B, we're answering this with a very narrow scope, meaning we're not dealing with families that are together, because a couple that's together will make whatever decision they want to. But when we have clients who are already divorced coming to us and saying, I just finished paying for a 4-year degree at University of Western Ontario. I paid X percentage of this $100,000 bill, which included room, food, tuition, books, and the works. And I also paid child support in the summer months when the kid was at home with the other spouse. Do I still have to pay child support now that they're at home doing nothing or working part-time? This is a very popular question, and our intention is to answer that today by looking at some of the laws that answer this. So what I'm going to throw out to you, Leanne, there is this thing called law. And in the law, there is this word called child or child of the marriage. And in Ontario, we've got two laws for that. We've got the Divorce Act, which is federal, and we've got the Family Law Act, which is provincial. But for the most part, the definition of child does not end when they hit their 18th birthday. Can you tell our viewers why?
Well, what the law looks at is when is a child able to withdraw from parental control. And what that means essentially is when is a child able to become self-supporting and able to, live on their own, and they don't need the support of their parents. And in Toronto in 2025, most 18-year-olds are not in that type of situation. And it's very common for them to be going on and getting a post-secondary education as well. So if they're a student, they're a full-time student, that makes sense that they're not able to be financially independent or financially support themselves. But as Steve was touching upon a few minutes ago, there's lots of children who maybe even have a degree and they're still not able to essentially withdraw from parental control. They're not able to become independent, self-supporting, leave the home. And so that's where we run into this issue. And what I often see in my practice is that it seems that it's more common that the children in this situation, and again, I'm generalizing, but this is what I see. They're more often living with mom, and mom is maybe very empathetic to their situation and wants to help them. And maybe dad's a little bit tougher and thinks, okay, well, Johnny has a university degree. Why isn't Johnny able to support himself? Why do I need to keep supporting him? When I was his age, I had a job and I moved out and I was doing A, B, and C. So I want my child to be the same way that I was. It may be a little tougher love there. And so it's not that dad doesn't care about his children, but he kind of thinks, okay, like the only way to get them out on there is to be a little tougher. Maybe if they're not coddled in their words. So I'm not saying that I think it's coddling, but that might be the word someone in this situation might use, that maybe they think that if the child is given a bit more of a push or a little more tough love, maybe they can get out and become self-supporting. And that's where this friction can happen between one parent and the other parent. And in my experience, and I'm interested to hear yours as well, Steve, in these types of cases, they're very fact specific. The situation of that specific family is really, really relevant and important to determining whether there still exists a child support obligation. And some of the things that courts take into consideration is the financial means of the family. So, for example, parents who have less money available, they have lower incomes, they don't have money saved away. In that type of situation, there might be less of an expectation that child support continue with an adult child. But a family where they have higher incomes and they have more means, there might be an expectation that in that situation, they can afford to support their child a little bit longer while the child gets on their feet. And similarly with multiple degrees, I've seen it, a common situation or a common rule of thumb for many years was child support through one degree or like one post-secondary degree or one post-secondary diploma. But I've seen cases where judges order child support and payment for multiple university degrees. And again, it goes back to the circumstances of that specific family. If both parents have multiple degrees, it's a very educated family and they have the means, then a judge might say that child support should be paid through more than one degree. But if the family has more limited means and maybe the parents do or don't have post-secondary education themselves, in that situation, a judge might say that child support through one degree is sufficient and it should end there. The child is no longer meeting the definition child of the marriage. What's your experience with it, Steve?
Well, you know what? I'm going to pick up on your last point, the definition of child of the marriage. So for those of you that are curious to see this in writing, all you got to do is Google Divorce Act Canada and scroll to the definition section at the very beginning, where it says a child of the marriage means a child of two spouses or former spouses who, at the material time, which could be when the kid is 25 years old, is either A or B. So now choose which one your child falls under. If it's A, that's the easier one. A is under the age of majority and has not withdrawn from their charge. So this deals with 18 and under. So very few parents come to us and say, do I have to support my 17-year-old? We're divorced. The answer generally is yes, although I do have to say there are some rare cases where a child has been estranged from a parent and the parent takes a strong view that they shouldn't have to support a child that doesn't even want to have a relationship with them. But that is a very, very small fraction of society. It's the other one. It's B. B says a child is a child of the marriage if the child is the age of majority or over and under their charge, which is another way of saying needs their money, but unable by reason of illness, disability, or other cause to withdraw from their charge or to obtain the necessaries of life. Well, that's a mouthful. Let's break that one down. Over the age of majority and over, that's easy. They're 18 or older. Under their charge, all the parent who is seeking support from the other parent has to prove is the kid is living with them and therefore needs support. Then the language, by reason of illness, disability, or other cause, cannot withdraw and needs help. So illness, that's probably to be answerable by doctors. Disability, possibly doctors, maybe psychologists. Could it be a psychological disability? Could it be a vocational disability? Could it be something like autism, dyslexia, ADHD? That might fall in the illness disability category. But in 1985, when this law was created, what did those legislators think of the language or other cause? What is that other cause? Is that other cause because the kid hasn't yet figured out what he wants or she wants to do with her life? Is the other cause because the mother that's seeking support needs that kid at home because the mother is caring for her elderly parents and therefore needs the kid at home? What is that other cause? Is that other cause a poor job market? Is that other cause Trump's tariffs on Canada? In other words, what is this thing called? The child is the age of majority or older, but unable to be independent by another cause. And that is exactly your point, Leanne, which is every case has its own unique set of facts. And if the person seeking support for their 21 or 25 or 28-year-old can convince a judge that the child is a child of the marriage within the definition that I just described, then support is payable. And by the way, your last point couldn't be more robust in that if the payor parent is earning $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year, the judge doesn't have to order the full table amount. The judge can order any amount. And a judge might look at the payor parent and say, you've got the means. This is your biological child. The ex-wife is not getting any spousal support from you, or she's already getting it or got it. But your 25, 26, 28-year-old is your kid, and that kid needs food, clothing, and shelter. And you make enough to pay. And this kid is a child of the marriage because he falls or she falls under the definition. And then there are means and needs. And a judge can make that order. And so therefore, the sort of negotiation that people do when they split up, and they define when support starts and when support ends is really important. Because like you said, Leanne, in some cases, we negotiate separation agreements or court orders when the kids were still minors that say that support will end on a particular date. And it could even be a list of dates, and it could be the later of all of these. For example, when they're 18, if they don't go to university. If they go to university, when they stop being in university full time. It could say after they graduate university, or when they're 23, whichever is later. So a child might stay in university for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, graduate at 22, but support goes to 23. Or the other way, it could say the earlier of the two, meaning at age 25 or a first degree. Well, the first degree might not happen until age 27, but the agreement says till 25. So there are tools that are used, and by the way, more important today than ever, because people are splitting up. They're leaving minor children when they break up. And oftentimes, they're building a new life. And when they build a new life with a new partner, they need to be able to make financial decisions like, are we going to buy a new condo? Will I be able to afford the mortgage payments on that new condo? And they're building into that analysis that, well, my eldest child will be graduating university in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And so therefore I will not be paying support anymore. And then I'll be able to buy the house and so forth, or have a child with a new partner. So these decisions and these terms are critical when a couple splits up with minor children, to not allow this runaway train to possibly plow through the next chapter of your life.
And that's why it's very important when these agreements are being done to get proper legal advice, so that the wording in the agreements can be very specific, very particular, and reflect what your wishes are and what the goals are, so that you don't run into a problem down the road where you're being expected to continue paying child support in a situation that you thought that you wouldn't be in. This is a more recent phenomena. I think years ago, it wasn't something that we saw as much of. But it's tough for parents of a certain age too, because I've seen situations where somebody they're closing in on 65 and they want to be able to retire, but they're still supporting their adult children who, through no fault of their own, it's a tough job market. It's difficult for them to get out on their own. And because people have had children a bit later in life too, in more recent generations, parents having children in their mid 30s, late 30s, even 40s, you get this situation where somebody who's worked hard all their life, they want to retire at 65, but they still have child dependents who are adults. And so this situation is becoming more and more of a topic in family law. And so that's why we wanted to cover it today, because I think it's a really on-trend, relevant topic.
Absolutely. And it's not just in family law, it's in real estate matters. People are buying and selling houses, and they have to think about whether they need the space, whether they need to keep the space for their adult children. They need to figure out whether they can downsize. And if they downsize, do they need another room? It's affecting people's financial planning. It's affecting whether they are putting money in or taking money out of RSPs. It affects their pension, because they have to decide whether they're going to take early pension or not. So it's not just in the scope of what we do every day. It's in other spheres as well. So we hope that you found today's topic of use and help. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Leanne, for this episode of Divorce Explained, and we will see you again next time.